I'm here with Cameron Lord, CFO at RF Code. Hey, Cameron, how's it going?
Good, Andy. How are you?
Doing great. Great to talk with you here. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Tell me a
Likewise.
little bit about what you do as the CFO at RF Code.
Sure. So as CFO, the financial reporting and all that rolls up to me, but I also manage our manufacturing operations and sales ops. So pretty much the business aside from engineering and sales.
Great. And as the CFO, what are some of the biggest challenges that organizations are facing with IT assets?
So big ones we run into are over procurement and managing procurement spend, and also just compliance and keeping track of all of these assets. Companies, especially companies with enterprise-owned data centers, have an extraordinary number of servers and racks, and for many industries, it's essential to know where everything is.
So from an operational standpoint, audits come up on a regular basis. What are the real effects of failing an audit, and how does this affect their business, looking at it through a financial lens?
Sure. Well, it can really vary, right? So on the milder end of the spectrum, you have a financial audit, and the auditors come in, and you have to spin up a bunch of burst labor, or you have your IT team repurposed on counting and locating, and maybe you have to book an adjusting journal entry to reconcile your general ledger with reality for the audited financials. But where it can be really problematic is if you have a hard drive with PII or other protected information, and all of a sudden you can't locate it. In the absence of an active solution, you really have no way to affirmatively demonstrate chain of custody. You have systems in place, but they're not foolproof.
So you mentioned active solution. Let's double click on that a little bit. Talk to me about RF Code's active solution and how you help companies solve for that.
Sure. So if a company has all of their assets tagged with active RFID tags, it's essentially the same as having a physical audit performed every minute, right? And so the way I like to frame it is without active, you know where your assets were. With active, you know where they are. And any audit is out of date, in some cases, as you're conducting it, right? A data center is a much more dynamic environment than a lot of people assume. And I think you have a mental image of just racks in a environment where nothing is moving, but practically speaking, there's hard drives being replaced, there's new racks rolling in and rolling out. And what we found is that customers often think that they are 95, maybe 100% accurate. And when we get in and essentially do a physical audit as part of the deployment, they're 80, 85% accurate.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because there's definitely an impact with this level of accuracy. What would 100% accurate asset visibility mean to a CFO?
Well, there's a sort of the first order kind of obvious dimension to it, which is that, I know where everything is. When I do my audit, I can have a systems audit done, instead of doing a physical audit. There's benefit in not having to either hire burst labor or divert my team. But the bigger value is really kind of second order, and it's a function of what does this real-time information enable? And we see our customers take advantage of it in different ways, but the common themes are they're able to procure fewer assets. They avoid over procurement through a couple of approaches. For one, their dwell time, which is the time that newly procured hardware is sitting idle, usually goes down. That's often a metric that these data centers are monitoring. But we also see it where they're often in production environments, they need hardware now. And so they may go out and order it because they need it right now, even though they already own it. And so it's not uncommon for a data center to buy something they already have because they need it for an acute reason. But if with a high, or 100% certainty where something is, then you can quickly consult your asset register and say, oh, okay, here's the thing we need. I don't even have to wait 2 days for it to show up. I already have it. And that also saves with your capital spending. A third dimension to it is we've seen customers successfully negotiate discounts with their vendors because they have basically when a rack hits their dock, it's pre-tagged from their reseller, and that fires an alert to their ERP, which then enables them to immediately receive that hardware and pay it. And by reducing the window from when it's landed to when it's paid, they're able to negotiate discounts, which can be very significant for some of our customers.
Well, that's really interesting, and that leads into my next question, which is what effect of accurate inventory controls impact future compute budgeting?
Well, I mean, all things being equal, you don't have to spend as much, right? And I mean, to put it in kind of straightforward terms, let's say on average, your hardware sits for a month before it's in production. Then practically speaking, that means that you hold 13 months worth of procurement, right? You're always over procuring to the extent that it takes, that there's a lag between when it lands and when it's in production. I mean, we've had a customer tell us that they were able to reduce their spend by 10% through primarily through being able to find things that they either knew they had and couldn't find or didn't know that they had in the first place. So again, it's not unusual for people to just, when they need something, they order it because the business need is it's essential. But obviously, if you have it, then you don't need to buy it.
The 10% is substantial. How much does that equate to, do you think, on average for a client?
I mean, it's gonna vary depending on the size, but millions of dollars easily. So.
Well, that's also very interesting from an ROI perspective. Talk to me a little bit about ROI when your clients are looking at creating a budget for RF code and working with you.
Mm-hmm. So there's a few dimensions to it. Again, the most obvious one is eliminating the audit, right? And so for each of these companies, whether it's for their financial audit or otherwise, at least once a year, they're having to physically count and locate everything. And that, whether it's outsourced, in which case it's probably a six-figure engagement, or if it's insourced, then there's the opportunity cost of having your payroll people who are, in most cases, hired to do something higher level than count and locate hardware. You eliminate that. And so that's the sort of first most obvious saving. Then there's, to the extent that you're able to engage in smart procurement, which would be different aspects of some of the techniques that we talked about that customers have been able to use this information to enable them to spend less and buy less. And then the third dimension is if you're in an industry where you just truly can't afford to misplace your technology. And I think that's why we have a lot of traction with companies in financial services and healthcare. These are companies with sensitive information, and it's arguably impossible to know with 100% certainty where something is unless it's constantly reporting back its location.
You mentioned smart procurement. Let's discuss smart procurement a little bit. What does that mean to you, and how's it helpful for your clients?
Sure. So smart procurement is just kind of a suitcase word that we use to capture all of the different ways that having real-time, 100% accurate location information enables companies to deploy business processes that allow them to spend less on IT assets. And that's going to be the combination of not buying things you don't need, getting things in production faster, and securing favorable terms with your resellers when you do. Those seem to be the main sort of avenues where companies are able to realize savings.
And so when you're realizing those savings, it sounds like that is found budget for a solution like yours, which then gives them assurance also to have all the other benefits that having 100% accountability on all of their hardware, that's a huge benefit. So it's kind of found budget when you're saving on whether it's double procurement or other ways that you're spending on your IT assets.
Yes, definitely. And in addition, these are typically organizations that have invested a lot of money in whether it's a DCIM, right, their data center management tool, or other infrastructure. And all of those investments are only as good as the information that's fed into them. And so if you have a DCIM and the data that's going into it is 80 or 85% accurate, then all of a sudden the whole system's integrity is suspect. And a lot of times, that's the moment when companies come talk to us is, they've invested in their data center infrastructure. In a lot of cases, they've designed it themselves. And now they realize that they have this data integrity problem that they've been unable to solve with whether it's barcodes or passive or other approaches.
Talk to me a little bit about the data integrity problem. What are some of those challenges that your clients face during that moment, and how are they trying to solve that? And when they work with you, how do they solve that?
Sure. Well, just practically speaking, you go into your DCIM and it says that I have these assets in these locations, and then you go out on the floor and they're not there. Or conversely, it says that you have, like for planning, right, that I've got room here to deploy this procurement rack, and it shows up on the dock. They get it burned in, ready to go, and there's no space there, right? And so there's this mismatch between making business decisions based on essentially like an incorrect map.
So interesting. So, it sounds to me like there's so much benefit from spending less on IT assets, accounting for every piece of hardware that is in your environment, reducing risk of an audit. What are some other financial impacts that companies look for when they're working with you, and what does before and after look like when they work with you?
Sure. So, before, it's typically approximately 80-85% accuracy, right? And so that means it's not so much that I'm flying blind, but I'm flying without confidence, right? I don't know with certainty what the lay of the land is, or my systems don't necessarily reconcile. And then the other is, there's this risk of an acute loss or event hanging out there that we like to think, or we believe that we mitigate, right? And so every 6 to 12 months you see a headline about a hard drive that turns up at a hardware refurbisher or at a pawn shop or something, and it has some sort of sensitive information on it. And the only way you can really be sure that things haven't disappeared is if they're telling you where they are, right? Because then, the second they stop reporting, that's an alert. And now it's something for me to go investigate. And in any other sort of solution, I don't know until I go look again.
It makes a lot of sense. Well, Cameron, this has been really interesting. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. And Cameron Lord, CFO of RF Code. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.